The wrench slipped from Mac Sullivan's frozen fingers as he heard voices cutting through the Montana blizzard. He'd been alone on this ranch for 5 years, and visitors in weather like this meant trouble. Stepping out of the barn, he squinted through the swirling snow at 11 figures standing in perfect military formation near his porch. Too perfect. Something felt wrong about the way they held themselves, like actors playing soldiers rather than the real thing. "Sir, we need shelter for the night," called out a woman who stepped forward from the group. "Our vehicle broke down." Mac's eyes drifted to their beat-up bus, then to the guitar case one of them clutched against her chest. His breath caught in his throat. The case was identical to the one Sarah used to carry, down to the faded flower stickers on the side. The same case that had been gathering dust in his closet for 5 years. He didn't know who these women were, or what game they were playing, but they'd picked the wrong ranch to run their con. Mac's weathered hands trembled as he wiped grease from his fingers with an old rag. The woman who'd spoken stepped closer, and he could see her more clearly now. Mid-30s, Asian features, with the kind of steady gaze that suggested real military training. But the uniformity of their appearance bothered him. 11 women, all roughly the same age, all carrying identical duffel bags. It felt staged, like a production company had cast them from the same mold. "Name's Riley Chen," she said, extending a gloved hand. "We're part of a veteran transition program, heading to Denver. Storm caught us off guard." Mac didn't take her hand. Instead, he studied the other women behind her. Some looked genuinely cold and tired, while others seemed too alert, too ready. One of them kept glancing at his house like she was memorizing the layout. Another had positioned herself with a clear view of the road, as if watching for someone. The whole situation screamed setup. But Mac couldn't figure out what they wanted from a washed-up construction engineer living alone in the middle of nowhere. The guitar case drew his attention again, held by a young woman with short blonde hair and nervous eyes. She clutched it protectively, the way Sarah used to when she was anxious about performing. Mac's chest tightened with a familiar ache. Sarah had been gone for 5 years, claimed by cancer that ate through her like wildfire, leaving him with nothing but memories and a daughter he was too broken to raise. Emma lived with her grandmother in Denver now, visiting only during holidays, when Mac could pretend to be the father she deserved. The irony wasn't lost on him that these supposed soldiers were heading to the same city where his 9-year-old daughter was growing up without him. "Denver's still 2 hours away in good weather," Mac said, his voice rough from disuse. "Storm like this, you won't make it past Cedar Ridge." He gestured toward the bus, its windshield already thick with ice. "That piece of junk won't survive the mountain passes." Riley Chen's expression didn't change, but Mac caught a quick glance she shared with the woman holding the guitar case. It was subtle, practiced, the kind of silent communication that came from working together for years, or from rehearsing this encounter. "We'd be grateful for any shelter you can provide," Riley said. "We don't need much, just somewhere warm until the storm passes." Mac wanted to say no, to send them back to their bus and let them figure it out themselves. He'd spent 5 years perfecting his isolation, building walls that kept the world at bay. But the temperature was dropping fast, and even con artists didn't deserve to freeze to death in a Montana blizzard. Besides, he was curious now. What kind of scam required 11 women to dress up as soldiers and drive to the middle of nowhere? What could they possibly want from him that was worth this much effort? He stepped aside, gesturing toward his house. "You can use the living room, but you're gone first thing tomorrow morning." As the women filed past him, Mac noticed details that reinforced his suspicions. Their boots were too clean for people who'd supposedly been traveling for days. Their uniforms looked fresh, recently pressed. But then he saw something that made him pause. The woman at the end of the line walked with a slight limp, favoring her left leg. When she turned to thank him, he caught sight of a scar along her jawline, partially hidden by her collar. Real scars, not makeup. Another woman had calloused hands and the kind of tan lines that came from months in the sun. Either these were the most dedicated con artists he'd ever encountered, or there was more to their story than he'd assumed. Mac followed them into his house, watching as they moved through his living room with military precision. They didn't gawk at his sparse furnishings or comment on the layers of dust that covered most surfaces. Instead, they quickly and quietly claimed spaces along the walls, setting down their gear with practiced efficiency. The house felt different with people in it. For 5 years, Mac had lived in silence, talking only to his cattle and the occasional phone call with Emma. Now, the soft murmur of voices and the rustling of equipment bags filled the space with an energy he'd forgotten existed. Riley Chen approached him as the others settled in. "We appreciate your hospitality," she said. "I know having strangers in your home can't be easy," Mac grunted, crossing his arms. "What's this transition program you mentioned?" Riley's answer came too quickly, too smoothly. "Helps veterans adjust to civilian life. We're heading to a facility in Denver for evaluation and job placement." The explanation felt rehearsed, but Mac decided to let it slide for now. Instead, he focused on the woman with the guitar case, who was sitting alone in the corner, staring at the instrument like it contained secrets. "That your guitar?" he asked, nodding toward the case. The woman looked up with startled eyes. "Yes, sir. I mean, it was my grandmother's. I've been carrying it since—" She trailed off, glancing at Riley for guidance. Mac felt a chill that had nothing to do with the storm outside. The woman's hesitation, the way she looked to Riley for approval, the identical guitar case. Too many coincidences. "Mind if I take a look?" he asked, taking a step toward her. The woman's grip tightened on the case, and Mac saw Riley tense in his peripheral vision. "Actually, the strings are old," the woman said quickly. "Probably wouldn't sound very good." Mac stopped walking, his suspicions crystallizing into certainty. These women knew something about Sarah, about the guitar that had been her most prized possession. But how? And why were they here, in his house, playing this elaborate game? He looked around the room at the 11 faces watching him, some with curiosity, others with what looked like sympathy. "I think," Max said slowly, "you ladies need to tell me what's really going on here." The storm howled outside, and Mac realized that whatever these women wanted from him, he was about to find out whether he was ready or not. Riley Chen exchanged glances with several of the other women before speaking. "Mr. Sullivan, we're not here by accident." Her admission hung in the air like smoke, and Mac felt his muscles tense for a fight he didn't understand. "We know about your wife, Sarah, and we know about your daughter, Emma." The words hit Mac like a physical blow. Nobody in Cedar Ridge talked about Sarah anymore, and Emma's existence was something he guarded like a state secret. "How do you know about them?" he demanded, his voice rising. "Who sent you here?" Riley held up her hands in a placating gesture. "We're not here to hurt you, Mr. Sullivan. We're here because someone who cared about you asked us to check on you." Mac's mind raced through possibilities. Sarah's mother had died 3 years ago. Emma's grandmother barely tolerated him. His few remaining friends had given up trying to reach him long ago. "That's impossible," he said. "There's nobody left who gives a damn about me." The woman with the guitar case stood up, clutching the instrument to her chest. "Mr. Sullivan, my name is Angela Williams. I knew your wife." Mac's world tilted. Sarah had been gone for 5 years, and he'd thought all her connections had died with her. "That's a lie," he whispered. "Sarah didn't know any soldiers." Angela's eyes filled with tears. "She volunteered at the VA hospital in Great Falls. She ran a music therapy program for veterans dealing with PTSD. She saved my life." The words crashed over Mac like a wave. Sarah had driven to Great Falls twice a week during her final months, claiming she was getting treatment. He'd assumed it was chemotherapy, more futile attempts to fight the cancer that was killing her. She'd never mentioned volunteering, never said anything about helping other people when she was barely strong enough to help herself. "She talked about you all the time," Angela continued, "about how proud she was of you, how worried she was about leaving you alone." Mac's legs felt weak, and he sank into his old recliner. "She never told me." His voice cracked, and he hated himself for showing weakness in front of these strangers. "She never said anything about any of you." Riley stepped forward, pulling a worn envelope from her jacket pocket. "She left this for you. Asked us to deliver it if something ever happened to her." Max stared at the envelope like it was a snake. His name was written on the front in Sarah's careful handwriting, and seeing it made his chest tighten with grief so intense he could barely breathe. She's been dead for 5 years, he said. Why are you bringing this to me now? Riley's expression softened. Because she asked us to wait. She knew you'd need time to grieve, time to find your own way. But she also knew you'd isolate yourself, and she was worried about what that would do to you and Emma. The mention of his daughter's name sparked anger in Mac's chest. Don't you dare bring Emma into this. She's fine where she is. Is she? Asked a new voice. Mac turned to see one of the other women, an older soldier with graying hair and kind eyes. When's the last time you saw her, Mr. Sullivan? The question hit harder than Mac expected. Emma's last visit had been Christmas, 8 months ago. She'd spent most of the time asking when she could come home, when they could be a family again. Mac had promised her soon, knowing it was a lie. She's better off with her grandmother, he said defensively. I can't. I'm not good for her right now. The older woman nodded, understanding. After I got back from Afghanistan, I told myself the same thing about my kids. Thought they were better off without their broken mom around. She paused, studying Mac's face. But kids don't need perfect parents. They need parents who love them enough to try. Mac felt exposed, like these women could see straight through the walls he'd built around his heart. You don't understand, he said. Emma deserves better than this place, better than me. Riley held out the envelope again. Maybe you should read what Sarah wrote before you decide what Emma deserves. Mac's hands shook as he took the envelope, feeling the weight of words he'd never expected to receive. The paper was yellowed with age, and he could smell the faint scent of Sarah's perfume clinging to it. She wrote this before she died? He asked. Riley nodded. About 2 months before. She was very specific about when we should give it to you. Mac turned the envelope over in his hands, afraid to open it. Reading Sarah's words would make her death real all over again, would force him to confront the grief he'd been running from for 5 years. But it would also give him a piece of her he'd thought was lost forever. She knew you'd blame yourself, Angela said softly. She knew you'd think you failed her and Emma, but she wanted you to know that wasn't true. Mac looked up at the 11 women surrounding him, all of them watching with expressions of sympathy and understanding. Who are you really? What is this transition program? Riley exchanged glances with the other women before answering. We're part of an informal network of female veterans who help each other through difficult times. Sarah connected us during her volunteer work, and we've stayed in touch ever since. The explanation felt incomplete, but Mac was too overwhelmed to press for details. She asked us to check on you periodically, Riley continued, to make sure you were okay, that you hadn't. She trailed off, but Mac understood. Sarah had been worried he might hurt himself, might give up entirely. The thought that his wife had been planning for his survival even while dying herself was almost too much to bear. I don't need checking on, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. I'm doing fine. Angela laughed, a sound devoid of humor. Mr. Sullivan, when's the last time you left this ranch? When's the last time you talked to another human being for more than 5 minutes? Mac opened his mouth to argue, then closed it. He couldn't remember the last time he'd driven to town, the last time he'd had a real conversation with anyone. The storm outside seemed to be weakening, but Mac barely noticed. He was holding a piece of Sarah in his hands, and the weight of it was overwhelming. Why now? He asked again. Why did she want you to wait 5 years? Riley's expression grew sad. Because she knew you'd need time to hit bottom before you'd be ready to climb back up. She was hoping you'd be ready to start living again. Mac looked around his house, seeing it through strangers' eyes. The dust, the emptiness, the way he'd turned it into a mausoleum instead of a home. I don't know how, he admitted. I don't know how to live without her. The confession hung in the air, raw and honest. That's why we're here, Riley said gently, to help you figure it out. Mac stared at the envelope in his hands, knowing that whatever Sarah had written would change everything. The question was whether he was brave enough to let it. Outside, the storm was beginning to clear, but Mac realized that his real weather was just beginning. I'll have our overlap, Jack shouted into. Mac's fingers trembled as he opened the envelope, unfolding the letter with the care of someone handling something precious and fragile. Sarah's handwriting filled the page, and just seeing it made his throat close up. "My dearest Mac," it began, and he had to stop reading to compose himself. When he looked up, the 11 women were watching him with expressions of patience and understanding. "Would you like some privacy?" Riley asked gently. Mac shook his head. "No. If she trusted you with this, then I guess I can too." He returned to the letter, reading Sarah's words aloud in a voice that grew stronger with each sentence. "If you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably blaming yourself for not saving me. But Mac, my love, there was nothing you could have done. The cancer was bigger than both of us, and I need you to know that fighting it was worth it because it gave us more time together." The letter continued, and Mac's voice cracked as he read Sarah's hopes for his future. "I know you're probably hiding from the world, thinking you're not good enough for Emma or anyone else, but the man I married is the strongest, most caring person I've ever known. You just need to remember how to see yourself the way I see you." Mac paused, looking up at Angela, who was crying openly now. "She wrote about you," he said, "about how music helped you heal." Angela nodded. "She saved my life, Mr. Sullivan. When I came back from overseas, I couldn't sleep, couldn't function. But Sarah's music therapy sessions gave me something to hold on to." Mac returned to the letter, reading about Sarah's work with veterans, her passion for helping others heal through music. "She never told me," he said, wonder in his voice. "She was fighting cancer and still trying to save other people." Riley spoke up. "She said music was the one thing that could reach people when nothing else could. She wanted to make sure that continued after she was gone." The final paragraph of the letter made Mac's heart stop. "Mac, I've asked Riley and the others to check on you because I know you'll try to carry this burden alone. But you don't have to. There are people who care about you, who want to help you heal. Please don't let my death be the end of your story. Live for Emma, live for yourself, and maybe someday, live for the other people who need what you have to give." Mac folded the letter carefully, his hands shaking. "She wanted me to continue her work," he said quietly. "She wanted me to help other veterans." The room was silent except for the wind outside, which had died down to a whisper. "Is that what this is?" Mac asked, looking around at the 11 women. "Are you all veterans who need help?" One by one, they nodded. "We all met Sarah at different times," Riley explained. "She connected us with each other, created this network of support. But we're not just here for ourselves. We're here for you too." Mac stood up, pacing to the window where he could see the storm clearing. "I don't know anything about helping people," he said. "I couldn't even help my own wife." Angela rose from her seat, still clutching the guitar case. "Mr. Sullivan, can I show you something?" She opened the case, revealing a beautiful acoustic guitar that looked almost identical to Sarah's. "This isn't my grandmother's guitar," she admitted. "It's Sarah's. She left it to me when she died, but she made me promise to bring it back to you someday." Mac's knees went weak. "That's impossible. Sarah's guitar is in my bedroom closet." Angela's smile was sad but knowing. "She had 2 guitars, Mr. Sullivan. She kept one here with you, and she kept one at the VA hospital for her sessions. She wanted you to have both when you were ready." Mac stared at the instrument, remembering how Sarah used to play it on their front porch during summer evenings. "She said music was the language of healing," Angela continued. "She wanted you to have the tools to speak that language." The weight of Sarah's plan was beginning to sink in. She hadn't just arranged for these women to check on him. She'd orchestrated something much bigger, a way for him to find purpose again while helping others heal. "She thought of everything," Mac said, his voice filled with awe and grief. "Even while she was dying, she was planning for after." Riley stepped forward. "She knew you'd resist at first. She knew you'd think you weren't qualified or worthy. But she also knew that helping others was the only thing that would bring you back to life." Mac looked around the room at the 11 women, seeing them clearly for the first time. They weren't con artists or actresses. They were broken people who'd found each other through his wife's compassion, and now they were trying to return the favor. "What exactly are you asking me to do?" he said. "I'm not a therapist. I'm not a counselor. I'm just a construction worker who builds things." One of the women he hadn't heard from yet spoke up. "Sometimes the best healers are the ones who've been broken themselves." The storm outside had passed, leaving behind a world covered in fresh snow that sparkled in the moonlight. Mac felt like he was seeing his ranch with new eyes, imagining what it could become, with Sarah's vision guiding him. "She wanted me to turn this place into something," he said slowly. "A place where veterans could come to heal." Riley nodded. She had very specific ideas about how it could work. Music therapy, animal therapy, just having a safe space where people could be themselves, without judgment. Mac walked to his bedroom and retrieved Sarah's other guitar from the closet, bringing it back to the living room. For the first time in 5 years, he held the instrument that had been such a part of their life together. "I can't play anymore," he said. "I haven't touched it since she died." Angela stood up, moving to stand beside him. "Maybe it's time to learn again. Maybe we could learn together." Mac looked at the 2 guitars, then at the 11 women who'd somehow found their way to his door on a snowy night. "And Emma?" he asked. "What about my daughter?" "She needs her father," Riley said simply. Sarah was very clear about that. She said Emma would understand about the ranch, about helping other people. She said Emma had her mother's heart. Mac felt tears he'd been holding back for 5 years finally begin to fall. "I'm scared I'll let her down," he whispered. "I'm scared I'll let all of you down." The women gathered around him, and Mac felt surrounded by the kind of support he'd forgotten existed. "That's what we're here for," Riley said, "to make sure you don't have to do this alone." Mac looked at Sarah's letter one more time, then at the faces of the women who'd become his unexpected family. "Okay," he said, his voice growing stronger. "Okay, let's figure out how to do this." Outside, the storm had passed, but Mac realized that his real weather was just beginning to clear. For the first time in 5 years, he felt like he might actually have a future worth living. The question now was whether he was brave enough to build it. 3 months later, Mac stood on his front porch, watching Emma play with the ranch's newest residents. His daughter had taken to the veteran program with the enthusiasm Sarah had predicted, appointing herself as the official greeter for new arrivals. "Dad, can I help with the music therapy session today?" Emma asked, running up to him with dirt on her knees and joy in her eyes. Mac smiled, the expression feeling more natural now than it had in years. "Ask Angela. She's the one in charge of the music program." The ranch had transformed in ways Mac couldn't have imagined. The old barn had been converted into a meeting space where veterans gathered for group sessions. The guest house had been renovated to provide temporary housing for people transitioning back to civilian life, and throughout it all, Sarah's guitars provided the soundtrack for healing. Riley walked up to join them, a clipboard in her hand and a satisfied expression on her face. "The Department of Veterans Affairs wants to tour the facility next month," she said. "They're interested in making this an official program." Mac nodded, still amazed by how quickly things had developed. Word of the ranch had spread through veteran networks, and they'd had a steady stream of visitors seeking help. "Sarah would be proud," he said. And for the first time, thinking about his wife brought more happiness than pain. "She would be," Riley agreed. "But I think she'd be even prouder of you." Mac looked around at the property that had become so much more than a ranch. It was a place of healing, of second chances, of finding family in unexpected places. "I couldn't have done this without you," he said. "Without all of you." Emma came running back with Angela's guitar in her small hands, and Mac watched his daughter attempt to play the chords Angela had been teaching her. She was getting better every day, finding her own voice through the instrument her mother had loved. "Dad, listen to this," Emma said, and began to play a simple melody that filled the evening air with hope. Mac closed his eyes, and for a moment, he could almost hear Sarah's voice harmonizing with their daughters. When he opened them again, he saw 11 women who'd become his extended family, a daughter who was thriving, and a future that stretched out before them full of possibility. The ranch that had once been a symbol of his isolation had become a beacon of connection, and Mac finally understood what Sarah had been trying to tell him all along. Healing wasn't something you did alone. It was something you did together. One broken person helping another find their way back to wholeness. As the sun set over the Montana mountains, Mac picked up his guitar and joined Emma in her song. The music drifted across the ranch, carrying with it the promise of tomorrow and the knowledge that sometimes the most beautiful things grew from the deepest pain. Sarah's legacy lived on in every note, every healed heart, every life that found its way back to hope. And Max Sullivan, the man who'd once thought he had nothing left to give, discovered that love never really died. It just finds new ways to bloom.